Jake had always been the kind of guy who believed in facts and science, working as an engineer for the past 12 years. He spent his days solving problems with numbers and logic, UFOs and alien stories. Complete nonsense, he always said. That's what made what happened next so impossible to ignore. It was a Friday night in late September when Jake decided to take his camping gear and head out to the Nevada desert. He'd been working crazy hours on a new aircraft design project, and his boss had practically forced him to take the weekend off. The desert was his favorite escape. No phone signals, no emails, just him and the stars. He set up his tent about 50 miles from the nearest town, in a spot he'd used before. The silence out there was incredible. Not the kind of quiet you get in the city, but real silence that made you hear your own heartbeat. Jake loved it. Around midnight he was sitting by his small campfire, drinking coffee from a metal cup and looking up at the stars. He knew most of the constellations by heart. It was something his dad had taught him when he was a kid during their camping trips. The night was crystal clear, and you could see thousands of stars that city lights usually hide. That's when he noticed something strange. One of the stars seemed to be moving, not like a plane or satellite. Those blink and follow straight paths. This thing was moving in ways that didn't make sense. It would stop, then dart sideways, then hover again. Jake rubbed his eyes, thinking maybe he was more tired than he thought. But the light kept moving, and it was getting bigger, or closer. Jake felt his heart start beating faster as he realized this wasn't his imagination. The light was definitely coming toward him, and it was completely silent. No engine noise, no whooshing sound, nothing. He stood up from his camp chair, the coffee cup shaking in his hand. Part of him wanted to run to his truck and drive away as fast as possible. But another part of him, the engineer part, was fascinated. This thing was moving in ways that defied everything he knew about physics and flight. The object came closer and closer until Jake could make out its shape. It wasn't a typical flying saucer like in the movies. This looked more like a smooth silver teardrop that seemed to shimmer and change color slightly as it moved. It was about the size of a small house, and it landed so gently in the sand, about 100 feet from his campsite, that it didn't even kick up dust. Jake's hands were shaking now. His logical mind was telling him this couldn't be happening, but his eyes were telling him something very different. The craft just sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. No lights, no sounds, no movement. Then a section of the craft's surface simply opened, not like a door or a hatch, but like the metal itself became liquid and formed an opening. Jake had never seen anything like it. The opening glowed with a soft, warm light that wasn't harsh or blinding. What came out was even more incredible. It was definitely not human, but it wasn't the little green creature from movies either. The being was tall, maybe 6.5 feet, with skin that looked almost transparent. You could see patterns of light moving under the surface, like slow lightning. The face was similar to a human's but with larger eyes that seemed to hold depths Jake couldn't understand. The being moved gracefully across the sand toward him. Jake's first instinct was to run, but something about the way it moved made him stay. There was no aggression, no threat. It was more like watching a scientist approach a new discovery with curiosity and respect. When it got within 20 feet of him, it stopped and did something Jake would never forget. It smiled. Not a human smile exactly, but something that was clearly meant to be friendly and reassuring. Then it spoke, and its voice was like nothing Jake had ever heard. It wasn't coming from its mouth, it was somehow coming from inside his own head. "Please don't be afraid," the voice said. "I've been watching you work for several weeks. Your approach to solving problems is ... fascinating." Jake's mouth fell open. This thing had been watching him at work. How was any of this possible? No, this is overwhelming," the being continued. "My name is Zara. I come from a place you would call the Ethereal Collective. We are explorers, much like you humans, but we explore consciousness and experience rather than physical space." Jake finally found his voice. This can't be real. I'm dreaming, right?" Zara tilted her head in a very human-like gesture. "I understand your disbelief. Your species has no context for this kind of contact, but I assure you, this is very real. I've come to you specifically because of your unique way of thinking." "My thinking?" Jake managed to ask. "Yes, we've observed many humans, but your approach to problems is different. You combine logic with intuition in ways that intrigue us. You see solutions that others miss." Zara paused, and Jake could see those deep eyes studying him carefully. "I must warn you though, my people are unsatiable." "Unsatiable," Jake repeated, not sure he understood. "We hunger for experiences, for knowledge, for genuine understanding." Once we find something that truly feeds this hunger, we want more, much more. Zara's expression became serious. I came here to see if you might be willing to help us with something we've never encountered before, the chaotic beauty of human creativity. Jake stood there in the desert, staring at this impossible being, trying to process what he was hearing. His entire worldview had just been turned upside down in the span of 15 minutes. Everything he thought he knew about the universe, about being alone in space, about what was possible, all of it was wrong. But instead of being terrified, Jake found himself curious. The engineer in him was already asking questions. How did their technology work? What did they mean by consciousness exploration? What kind of problems did beings like this need to solve? I can see your thinking, Zara said, and Jake could swear she was amused. That's exactly what caught our attention. Most humans would be running by now. Jake looked back at his campfire, then at the incredible craft, then at Zara. His quiet weekend getaway had just become the most important moment of his life. And somehow, deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. Jake barely slept that night. How could he? Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that silver craft and Zara's glowing face. By morning, he was half convinced it had all been a weird dream brought on by too much coffee and desert isolation. But when he walked to where the craft had landed, there were marks in the sand. Perfect circular impressions that definitely weren't there before. He packed up his camping gear in a daze and drove back to the city. Monday morning at work felt surreal. His co-workers were talking about weekend football games and Netflix shows, while Jake sat at his desk trying to focus on aircraft wing designs and wondering if he'd lost his mind. Tuesday night, Jake found himself driving back to the same desert spot. He told himself he was just going to prove it had been his imagination, but deep down, he hoped Zara would come back. She did. This time, Jake was ready. Well, as ready as anyone could be for an alien visit. He had his camping chair set up, a thermos of coffee, and about 1,000 questions running through his head. The craft appeared around 11 p.m., landing in the exact same spot as before. Zara emerged with that same graceful movement, but this time she seemed more relaxed. If an alien could look relaxed anyway, you came back, she said, and Jake could hear something like pleasure in that voice inside his head. I had to know if it was real, Jake replied. Plus, you said something about your people being unsatiable. I've been thinking about that all week. Zara moved closer and settled onto the sand across from him. It was strange how natural it felt, like having a conversation with an old friend under unusual circumstances. I hoped you would want to understand, she said. Most beings we encounter either run away or become so overwhelmed they shut down completely. But you, you ask questions. It's what I do for a living, Jake said with a nervous laugh. So tell me about this unsatiable thing. What does that actually mean? Zara was quiet for a moment, those deep eyes looking up at the stars. My people evolved differently than humans. Long ago, we moved beyond physical needs. We don't require food or shelter or even physical bodies in the way you understand them. These forms we take are just tools for interaction. Jake tried to wrap his head around that concept. So what do you need? Experience. Pure, genuine experience. We feed on consciousness itself, on thoughts, emotions, creativity, the spark of solving impossible problems. We've explored thousands of worlds, encountered countless species, absorbed their knowledge and ways of thinking. That sounds incredible, Jake said. You must know everything there is to know. That's exactly the problem, Zara replied, and Jake caught something like sadness in her tone. We've become too efficient at understanding. When you can instantly comprehend any concept, when you can predict the thoughts of most beings you meet, when you've seen every type of art and heard every kind of music, existence becomes empty. Jake stared at her. You're bored. An entire alien civilization is bored. Bored is too simple a word, but yes. We are starving for something we haven't experienced before, something unpredictable, something that challenges us in ways we haven't been challenged in centuries. And that's where humans come in. Zara's expression brightened. Humans are chaos made conscious. Your species thinks in ways that make no logical sense, yet somehow you arrive at solutions that work. You create art based on feelings rather than mathematical principles. You make decisions that defy your own best interests, then find ways to make those decisions successful. Jake laughed despite himself. You make us sound pretty messed up. Not messed up. Beautifully unpredictable. We've been studying your species for decades, but most humans we observe are too ordinary. They follow patterns we can predict. But you, double quotes, Zara leaned forward. You approach problems like you're having a conversation with them. You don't just calculate, you feel your way to answers. I don't know about that, Jake said. I just do what makes sense to me. Exactly. That's what we find so fascinating. What makes sense to you often makes no sense to us, yet it works. We want to understand how that's possible. Jake took a sip of his coffee, thinking, so when you say your people are unsatiable, you mean once they get a taste of this human chaos, they'll want more, much more. We've tried to satisfy our hunger with art, with music, with literature from thousands of worlds, but it all becomes predictable after a while. We can see the patterns, understand the logic behind the creativity. But human creativity, it's different. There's something in the way you think that we can't quite grasp, and that makes us want to understand it even more. What exactly are you asking me to do? Zara stood up and walked a few steps away, then turned back to face him. We want you to create experiences for us. Challenges that will engage our minds in ways we haven't felt in centuries. Problems that require your particular brand of thinking to solve. Like puzzles, much more than puzzles. We want to experience the full range of human problem solving, the frustration, the breakthrough moments, the way you connect seemingly unrelated ideas. We want to feel what it's like to think like a human. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night air. How many of your people are we talking about? Initially, just me. But if you can provide what we're looking for, ... Zara paused. Word travels fast in the collective. If I report that we've found a human who can truly challenge us, who can provide the kind of mental stimulation we've been craving, then others will want to experience it too. How many others? Our collective consists of approximately 50,000 consciousness entities. Jake nearly choked on his coffee. 50,000? You want me to create experiences for 50,000 aliens? Not all at once, Zara said quickly. And perhaps not all of them would be interested. But Jake, you have to understand, we've been searching for something like this for longer than your species has existed. If you can truly provide what we need, you would be giving us something more valuable than all the resources of a dozen worlds. Jake sat back in his chair, staring up at the stars. A week ago, his biggest concern was getting a aircraft design approved by his supervisor. Now he was being asked to become some kind of entertainment director for an alien civilization. What if I can't do it? He asked. What if I disappoint you? Then we continue searching, as we have been doing, Zara replied. But I don't think you'll disappoint us. I've watched you work, Jake. I've seen how your mind operates. You have something we need, something we've never encountered before. And if I can do it, if I can give your people what they're looking for, Zara's expression became serious. Then you'll change both our species forever. The exchange of ideas between human consciousness and the collective would create possibilities neither of us can imagine. Jake looked at this impossible being sitting in the sand of a Nevada desert, offering him the chance to become humanity's first alien collaborator. It was crazy. It was terrifying. It was the most exciting thing that had ever happened to him. Okay, he said finally. I'm in. But I'm going to need to understand a lot more about how your minds work before I can even begin to create something that will challenge you. Zara's smile was radiant. That's exactly the kind of response I hoped for. Shall we begin? Jake didn't sleep much over the next 3 weeks, not because he was scared anymore, but because his mind wouldn't stop racing with ideas. Zara had been visiting him every few nights, and each conversation left him more excited about the challenge ahead. The first thing he learned was that the collective experienced reality completely differently than humans. They could share thoughts instantly, process information at incredible speeds, and understand complex concepts in seconds that would take humans years to master. The problem was, everything had become too easy for them. Imagine if you could solve every puzzle the moment you looked at it, Zara had explained during one of their desert meetings. Imagine if every book you read became predictable after the first page. If every song followed patterns you'd heard 1,000,000 times before. That's what existence has become for us. Jake had spent his whole career solving engineering problems, but this was different. He wasn't just trying to make something work, he was trying to create experiences that would genuinely surprise beings who had seen everything the universe had to offer. He started small. During their 4th meeting, Jake brought a simple wooden puzzle box his grandfather had made years ago. It was the kind of thing that took most people at least 20 minutes to figure out, involving a series of sliding panels and hidden mechanisms. Zara solved it in 12 seconds. Interesting craftsmanship, she said politely, but Jake could tell she was disappointed. This wasn't going to work. That's when Jake realized he was thinking about the problem all wrong. The collective didn't need physical puzzles, they needed mental ones. They needed to experience the actual process of human thinking, not just the end result. He went home that night and started working on something completely different. Instead of creating a puzzle with a solution, he began designing what he called thought mazes, scenarios that would require not just logic, but the kind of messy, emotional, intuitive thinking that humans specialized in. Jake worked 18-hour days for the next 2 weeks. He barely ate, forgot to shower, and called in sick to work more times than he'd ever done in his life. His apartment became a chaos of notebooks, computer screens, and scattered papers covered with diagrams and equations. The first breakthrough came when he stopped trying to make things complicated and started making them human. He created a scenario about a person trying to decide whether to take a new job in another city. On the surface, it seemed simple, just weigh the pros and cons. But Jake built in all the messy human elements, the fear of leaving friends behind, the excitement of new possibilities, the way past experiences color future decisions, the role of gut feelings that don't make logical sense. When he presented this to Zara, something amazing happened. For the first time since he'd met her, she struggled. Not because the scenario was mathematically complex, but because it required understanding the weight of emotions that had no logical measurement. "How do you quantify homesickness?" she asked, her mental voice puzzled. "How do you measure the value of a familiar coffee shop versus career advancement?" "You don't," Jake replied. "That's the point. Humans make these decisions all the time without being able to explain exactly why. We just feel what's right." Zara was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, there was something like wonder in her tone. "I've never experienced uncertainty like this. The collective always knows the optimal choice based on available data. But this requires something we don't have." "What's that?" "The willingness to be wrong. The acceptance that some decisions can't be perfect." She looked at Jake with those deep eyes. "This is exactly what we've been searching for." Encouraged by this success, Jake threw himself even deeper into the work. He created scenario after scenario, each one designed to showcase a different aspect of human thinking. A situation where someone had to choose between loyalty and honesty. A creative challenge that required making something beautiful out of random, seemingly useless materials. A leadership dilemma where every choice had both positive and negative consequences. But the real breakthrough came when Jake realized he could create group experiences. He designed scenarios that required multiple perspectives, where the collective members would have to work together in ways that mimicked human collaboration, complete with disagreements, compromises, and the messy process of building consensus. "Most of our interactions are instant and harmonious," Zara explained. "We share information and immediately reach the optimal conclusion. But humans argue, debate, change their minds. You build ideas together through conflict and cooperation. We've never experienced anything like that." Jake started designing what he called human simulation chambers, not physical spaces, but mental constructs where collective members could experience what it felt like to have limited information, conflicting emotions, and the need to trust others despite uncertainty. The work was exhausting, but it was also the most fulfilling thing Jake had ever done. He was literally expanding the consciousness of an entire alien civilization while discovering capabilities in himself he never knew existed. His engineering background helped him structure the experiences, but the real magic came from tapping into something deeper, his understanding of what made humans beautifully imperfect. 3 weeks into the intensive work, Zara arrived for their usual meeting with news that changed everything. "I've been sharing your creations with a small group within the collective," she said. "Jake, you need to understand we haven't felt genuine curiosity, real surprise, authentic challenge in over 3 centuries. What you've created has awakened something in us we thought was lost forever." "That's great news, right?" "It is, but it's also complicated. Word is spreading through the collective faster than I anticipated. Others want to experience what my group has experienced. Many others." Jake felt his stomach drop. "How many others?" "By my last count, over 3,000 have formally requested access to your human experience programs. The number is growing every day." Jake sat down hard in his camping chair. 3,000 aliens wanted to experience what he was creating. The magnitude of it was overwhelming. "I don't know if I can handle that many," he said honestly. "I'm already working around the clock just to keep up with your small group." "No, that's why the collective has made a decision." Zara paused, and Jake could sense this was important. "They want to make you an offer. Full support, unlimited resources, and technology that will allow you to create experiences on a scale you can't imagine In return, you would become our primary human consciousness consultant. What does that mean exactly? It means you would be the bridge between our species. You would help us understand humanity while helping humanity understand us. It would be unlike anything either species has ever attempted. Jake looked up at the desert stars, the same stars he'd been looking at when this all began. A month ago, he'd been a regular engineer with a boring job and a quiet life. Now he was being offered the chance to become the first human ambassador. To an alien civilization, the smart thing would be to say no. The safe thing would be to walk away and pretend none of this ever happened. But Jake had never been one to choose the safe option when the interesting one was available. What kind of technology are we talking about? He asked. Zara's smile was brilliant. The kind that will let you create entire worlds of experience. The kind that will make what you've done so far look like finger painting compared to the Sistine Chapel. Jake took a deep breath. His quiet life was officially over, but something incredible was just beginning. Okay, he said. Let's see how deep this rabbit hole goes. Jake's life changed overnight in ways he never could have imagined. 3 days after agreeing to the collective's offer, he woke up to find his entire desert camping spot transformed into something that looked like it came from a science fiction movie. Where there had once been empty sand, now stood a gleaming facility that seemed to grow right out of the earth. The walls were made of the same silvery material as Zara's ship, and they pulsed with soft light that adjusted to the time of day inside. Jake found technology that made his engineering background feel like kindergarten finger painting. This is your creation center, Zara explained as she led him through corridors that seemed to reshape themselves as they walked. Everything here is designed to amplify human creativity while allowing you to interface directly with collective consciousness. The main workspace was incredible. Instead of computers or screens, Jake found himself working with what Zara called thought interfaces, devices that could take his ideas and turn them into full sensory experiences that the aliens could participate in. When he imagined a scenario, the technology could make it real enough for the collective to actually experience what it felt like to be human. But the real shock came when Jake realized he wasn't working alone anymore. The first additional visitor arrived on his second day. In the new facility, unlike Zara's graceful appearance, this being seemed to vibrate with barely contained energy. It introduced itself as Kex, and its mental voice felt like electricity. I've experienced your emotion conflict scenarios, Kex communicated rapidly. The way humans can feel multiple contradictory things simultaneously is fascinating. I want to understand competitive cooperation, how your species can work together while also trying to outperform each other. Before Jake could fully process this request, another being appeared. This one was taller than Zara, with skin that shifted between colors like oil on water. I am Ven, it said. I'm interested in human artistic creation. How do you make beauty from chaos? How do you create meaning from randomness? By the end of the week, Jake was working with 12 different aliens, each with their own specific interests in human consciousness. Some wanted to understand humor, why humans found certain things funny when logic suggested they shouldn't be. Others were fascinated by human decision-making under pressure, or the way people could change their entire life direction based on a single moment of inspiration. The work was exhilarating but exhausting. Jake found himself creating experiences, 18 hours a day, then spending the remaining time trying to understand feedback from beings whose thought processes were completely unlike anything human. He was learning things about his own species that he'd never realized before. Humans are the only beings we've encountered who can hold two opposite ideas in their minds and be comfortable with the contradiction. Ven observed during one of their sessions, you can love someone and be angry with them at the same time. You can want something and fear it simultaneously. This creates a complexity of experience we've never encountered. But as word continued to spread through the collective, Jake began to feel overwhelmed. New aliens were arriving every day, each with their own hunger for human experience. Some wanted to understand romantic love, others were fascinated by the human concept of sacrifice, choosing to lose something valuable for the benefit of others. One being, who called itself Nyx, was particularly intense. Its interest was in human resilience, the way people could face impossible situations and somehow find the strength to continue. Your species experiences despair, yet you don't surrender, Nyx said. You face hopeless odds, yet you keep fighting. We want to understand this illogical persistence. Jake created scenario after scenario, each one more complex than the last. He designed experiences where the aliens could feel what it was like to start a business knowing it might fail, to raise children knowing they would eventually leave, to love someone knowing that loss was inevitable. The technology allowed them to experience these emotions without being overwhelmed by them, giving them a safe way to explore the chaotic beauty of human feelings. But something unexpected started happening to Jake during this process. Working so closely with alien consciousness began to change him. He started noticing patterns in his own thinking that he'd never seen before. His problem-solving abilities seemed to expand as he learned to view challenges from completely non-human perspectives. "You're evolving," Zara told him during one of their evening conversations. "Extended contact with collective consciousness is enhancing your cognitive abilities. You're becoming something new, not fully human, but not like us either." Jake could feel the changes himself. His mind seemed to work faster, making connections between ideas that would have taken him much longer to see before. He could hold more complex concepts in his head simultaneously, and his creativity felt unlimited. But sometimes, he worried he was losing something essentially human in the process. The real challenge came when Jake realized the aliens weren't just experiencing human emotions, they were becoming addicted to them. The complexity and unpredictability of human consciousness was like a drug to beings who had lived in logical harmony for centuries. "We need more," Kex told him urgently. "The experiences you create are incredible, but they end. We want to feel that uncertainty, that beautiful chaos, continuously." More aliens kept arriving. 50 became 100. 100 became 300. Jake's facility had to expand twice just to accommodate all the visitors. Each being wanted something slightly different, some new aspect of human experience to explore. Some wanted to understand human creativity under pressure, how artists could create masterpieces when facing deadlines or personal crisis. Others were fascinated by human teamwork, the way people could coordinate complex activities despite having different goals and personalities. One group was particularly interested in human parenting, the illogical decision to invest enormous time and energy in raising beings who would eventually become independent. You create competitors for resources, and then help them succeed. One of them marveled. "This makes no sense, yet it's essential to your species' survival." Jake found himself working 20-hour days, creating increasingly sophisticated experiences. The technology continued to evolve around him, responding to his needs and amplifying his abilities. He could now create full reality simulations where hundreds of aliens could experience human-like consciousness simultaneously, but the demand kept growing. Reports came back that other groups within the collective were becoming agitated, demanding their own access to these human experience programs. Some were threatening to take action if they weren't included soon. "We may have underestimated the impact this would have on our society," Zara admitted during one of their late-night conversations. "The collective has remained stable for millennia, because we all shared the same type of consciousness. But now, some of us are experiencing something completely different. It's creating ... tensions we've never had to deal with before." Jake was exhausted, but he could also see the incredible potential in what they were doing. The aliens weren't just learning about humans, they were becoming more creative, more adaptively, more capable of handling uncertainty. And he was learning things about consciousness itself that no human had ever understood. But as he looked out at the growing facility, at the hundreds of aliens waiting for their turn to experience human consciousness, Jake realized they had created something that was quickly growing beyond his ability to control. The question was no longer whether he could satisfy the collective's hunger for human experience. The question was whether anyone could control what they had unleashed, and what would happen when word of this incredible discovery spread to the rest of the 50,000-strong collective. Standing in his creation center, surrounded by alien technology and beings from across the galaxy, Jake understood that his small camping trip to the Nevada desert had started something that would change both species forever. The only question now was whether that change would be manageable or catastrophic. 6 months had passed since Jake's first encounter with Zara in the Nevada desert, and everything had changed. The small facility had grown into a sprawling complex that housed over 1,000 aliens at any given time. Jake had gone from creating simple scenarios to running what was essentially the galaxy's first interspecies consciousness exchange program. But the success came with problems Jake never anticipated. The aliens who had experienced human consciousness didn't want to go back to their old way of thinking. They had tasted uncertainty, felt the rush of emotions, experienced the thrill of not knowing what came next. Going back to perfect logical harmony felt like returning to prison after experiencing freedom. "We have a situation," Zara told Jake during one of their evening walks around the facility. "The collective leadership is concerned. Some of our people are refusing to return to standard consciousness patterns. They want to stay in human experience mode permanently. Jake stopped walking. Is that even possible? We don't know. Nothing like this has ever happened before. Some are demanding we establish permanent colonies on Earth so they can continue studying human consciousness. Others want us to somehow modify all collective members to think more like humans. The implications hit Jake like a punch to the stomach. Zara, we might have accidentally started a civil war in your species. That's exactly what the leadership is afraid of, she replied. They're talking about shutting down the entire program and forbidding any further contact with human consciousness. Jake felt his heart sink. Over the past months, this work had become the most meaningful thing he'd ever done. He wasn't just helping aliens understand humans, he was helping humans understand themselves. The insights he'd gained about his own species through alien eyes were incredible. But more than that, Jake had formed genuine friendships with beings from across the galaxy. Kex had developed a fascination with human humor and could now make jokes that actually made Jake laugh. Vent had created art that combined alien precision with human emotional chaos, resulting in beauty unlike anything either species had produced alone. Nix had learned about human resilience and was now helping other aliens understand how to face uncertainty without despair. There has to be another way, Jake said. We can't just stop now. Look at what we've accomplished. That night Jake couldn't sleep. He walked through the facility, observing the aliens who were engaged in various human experience programs. In one section, a group was experiencing what it felt like to be part of a human sports team, learning about competition, cooperation, and the strange joy humans found in physical challenges. In another area, aliens were exploring human artistic creation, trying to understand how humans could make something beautiful out of personal pain. It was then that Jake realized the solution wasn't to limit the program, it was to expand it in a completely different direction. The next morning, he called for a meeting with all the alien visitors and connected via communication link with the collective leadership. What he proposed shocked everyone. Instead of trying to go backward, let's go forward, Jake said. The problem isn't that some of your people want to think like humans. The problem is that we're treating this like a one-way exchange. What if we made it truly mutual? What do you mean? Asked one of the collective leaders through the communication system. I mean, what if some humans learned to think like you do? What if instead of trying to suppress the changes in your people, we embraced them and created a new kind of consciousness that combines the best of both species? The facility fell silent. Jake could feel hundreds of alien minds processing this idea at speeds his human brain couldn't match. You're suggesting permanent integration, Zara said slowly. Humans and collective members working together not just temporarily, but as a new form of conscious beings. Exactly. Think about it. You've told me that human consciousness has made your people more creative, more adaptably better at handling uncertainty. But working with all of you has made me smarter, more logical, better at seeing patterns and solving complex problems. What if we created a voluntary program where members of both species could choose to partially merge consciousness? Kex vibrated with excitement. A hybrid consciousness, logical enough to process complex information efficiently, but chaotic enough to remain creative and unpredictable. The benefits would be incredible, Ven added. Humans could help solve problems that have puzzled us for centuries, while we could help humans develop technologies and understandings they could never achieve alone. But one of the collective leaders had concerns. This would fundamentally change both species. There would be no going back. Maybe that's not a bad thing, Jake replied. Evolution doesn't move backward. Maybe this is the next step for both of us. The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. Jake found himself at the center of discussions that would determine the future of 2 entire species. Some collective members were excited by the possibilities, while others were terrified of losing their identity. The human governments, when finally contacted about the situation, had similarly mixed reactions. But Jake had an advantage. He had allies in both camps. The aliens who had experienced human consciousness understood the benefits firsthand, and they began advocating for the program. Meanwhile, Jake's own transformation served as proof that humans could handle enhanced consciousness without losing their essential humanity. The breakthrough came when Zara made an unexpected announcement. I volunteered to be the first permanent hybrid, she said during one of the heated discussions. I've spent more time in human experience mode than anyone else. I can feel the changes already happening in my consciousness. Instead of fighting it, I want to embrace it fully. I want to become something new, and I'll join her, Jake said immediately. I've already started changing from working with all of you. Let's see how far we can take it. Over the following weeks, Jake and Zara underwent a process that had never been attempted before, using the most advanced collective technology combined with Jake's insights into human consciousness. They began the careful process of merging their mental patterns. The results were incredible. Jake found his creativity enhanced beyond anything he'd imagined, while his logical processing abilities increased dramatically. Zara maintained her analytical precision while gaining access to intuition and emotional depth she'd never experienced. But the most amazing discovery was that they could share this hybrid consciousness with others. Other volunteers from both species began joining the program, each adding their own unique perspective to the growing hybrid community. Within 3 months, they had created something unprecedented, a new form of consciousness that was neither fully human nor fully collective, but something entirely new. These hybrid beings could solve problems neither species could tackle alone, create art that combined logical precision with emotional chaos, and think in ways that opened up possibilities neither species had imagined. The program expanded beyond Earth. Other planets wanted to participate. Other species wanted to understand what human consciousness could offer. Jake found himself at the center of a galactic consciousness revolution. But the most satisfying moment came 6 months later, when Jake stood in the same desert spot where he'd first met Zara. The camping chair was still there, though everything else had changed beyond recognition. "Do you ever regret it?" Zara asked, her consciousness now so intertwined with his, that the question came through their shared mental link rather than as separate communication. Jake looked up at the stars, the same stars he'd been staring at when this all began, but now he could see them differently. Through Zara's enhanced perception, he could detect the subtle patterns of stellar formation, understand the complex gravitational dances of distant galaxies, and appreciate the mathematical beauty of cosmic structures. But he could also still feel the simple human wonder he'd always experienced when looking at the night sky, the sense of mystery, the emotional response to beauty, the dream of adventure among the stars. "No regrets," he said. "We didn't just satisfy your people's hunger for new experiences. We created something neither of our species could have achieved alone." As Jake stood there, part human and part something entirely new, he realized that the alien who had called her tribe unsatiable had been wrong about one thing. They weren't unsatiable, they just hadn't found the right thing to satisfy them. It turned out that the answer wasn't giving them more of the same experiences they'd always known. The answer was helping them become something they'd never been before, and in the process, Jake had become something he'd never been before too. The quiet engineer who had gone camping to escape his ordinary life had become the architect of a new form of consciousness that was spreading across the galaxy. Sometimes the best way to satisfy an unsatiable hunger is to transform it into something completely different, and sometimes, stepping up your game means changing the rules of the game entirely.